Okay, so here we are with the Lexicon PSP 42. This is an upgrade on their previous version of this, which has some added features and a new revised, improved emulation and some really interesting features. So I'll just start by saying I've got the precursor to this, the PCM 41, which I know extremely well, and this is very similar, except it's got a different preamp limiter section in it and some more advanced features in terms of the delay times and other things. But it's pretty much, I mean, the same, very much looks like the same unit. And the sound, I have to say, they've really got the Lexicon sound nailed on this. And they've added a lot of really great extra features. So the thing about these units is they've got a sound to them that's based on the technology of the time, the A to D converters, and the way that they did, you know, the delays at the time. But what makes it, in a sense, even more interesting to me is that some of the controls and some of the things are quite unique. The way modulation works, the sounds, is unique to these units. The PCM41 sounds quite similar in that way in terms of the modulation section. It's just quite a unique effect. There was something at the time of the imprecision and the kind of slight unpredictability of the way things worked. That this really is what made this unit, and you know, a lot of the lexicons of the time really sought after and famous. It just has a great sound, and it does stuff which doesn't sound like a perfect, predictable thing, which gives it an element of just a nice flavor to it. It's just so I can describe it. So I'm going to quickly go through the controls, and then I'm going to play some examples, some straight ahead ones, and then some unusual things that you can do with it with some of the extended controls that they've added, and also some more modern approaches that you can use it with production-wise. So before we get going, if you find these videos useful, please do click the like button, subscribe, and if you can press the thanks button, that really helps keep this channel going, and that's really appreciated. So starting here, we've got the input, and this is an important one here because it drives the preamp, and the preamp has saturation modeled on the original and a limiter model on the original, and these units were famous for their limiter sound when you drive it hard. Then we get output and feedback. That's pretty obvious what that is. This is the mix control, pretty straightforward. You've got a high cut, meaning that each delay gets a low pass filter on it, a cut of the high, so each repeat gets a little bit less high end in it as it goes along. Common found in delays, obviously, inversing the phase of the feedback, useful for when you've got very short delay times. And you can inverse the phase of the delay itself. Here is a repeat button that basically just freezes the buffer and repeats it, loops it basically. This is just the delay time up and down. You can sync it or have it free here. You can adjust the time by dragging on this, and you can select a time, or you can click these buttons up and down, or here as well you can do the same thing as here, drag here, and you get a menu. Now we have the modulation section, but before we get to that, I'm just going to look at a couple of things here. You've got a button here which doubles the delay time and halves the sample rate, so you get a more lo-fi effect, less high frequencies. And then this does the same kind of thing, only you can move it by hand. It doesn't just double it. You can go up to 0.5 slower or 0.5 faster, and similarly you get a change in tone by doing this. So both of these things are going to change the tone, even if you get the same delay time going with each of these. So you could have this set to quarter notes, click this in, it's still quarter notes, but you've got a lower sample rate, so you get a different sound. If you have it on the delay here so that it's 248 milliseconds and clicking this, you'll see it doubles it. which is what would happen in the real unit. The real units obviously didn't have host synced tempo and so forth. And the same thing happens here. If you move this, it changes this. And it's not active when you've got tempo sync on. So they change the tone. So again, you could get quarter notes on either one, or you could get, say, 300 here, and then you could move this back to here and use this to move it up to 300, but you'd get a different sound. And it's the same thing with this. You could that to 600, and you can move this back to 300. You're going to get a different sound because of different conversion rates and so forth. So that's that. Then you've got the modulation, and basically you've got a sine wave that modulates the delay time, and you can watch it happening. If I click this on here and I turn up this, you can see it moving up and down. So it's literally moving the delay time up and down on a sine wave. As you move it towards the ENV, it's now going to move up and down based on an envelope follower from the input signal. So the louder the input, the more it changes the delay time. And if you move it over this way, it becomes a square wave where it jumps between, here you can see it jumps between various values. In between these two, you get a certain amount of envelope and a certain amount of the modulation waveform shape, however you want to set it up. And this is the depth. So this is unique, and the sound of it is unique. Especially these in-between parts here, you get, as you'll hear, a really unique modulation sound. And then this is obviously the rate, the speed. Now this is the unit, this is the original unit, this is what it was like. Apart from a few extras, it's basically what it was like. But they've added a whole other section down here, which is new and really useful. Here you can change basically the input level, and that changes the way the A to D converters sound, and it changes the amount of saturation it's going to have, the amount of drive it's going to have. Same thing here, the sensitivity of the input. So you can really drive this further into saturation or limiting here and distortion, and you can get a lot of different flavors of the A to D converters by moving this around and these around, and the internal preamps and so forth. So that's useful for different tones. And then you've got the processing here, a range of different processing. This is the new one, which has the new emulated limiter from the original, and saturation. I can't remember the details of what each of these are, but they are different ones. This is the one from the previous version of this plugin. That's completely clean. This, I can't quite remember what that is. But you can read this in the manual. They're basically different sounds, kind of preamp sounds. This is a nice thing. It allows you to change this high cut where the high cut is. High cut's at 6K here, but you can move it up to 18K or down to 2K. Really useful, actually. A really nice addition, that one. By pass. Now this one, the direction, this is a little confusing. I found reading the manual to understand exactly what it does, but you can hear what it does. These two are very glitchy. It kind of reverses the delay, but it also kind of, when the buffer runs through, it kind of starts it again, so you get kind of a glitchy sort of sound. This is just another kind of glitchy sound. If you're into glitchy stuff, these could be interesting and useful. These two sound the same. This is forward and backward, but it isn't. So it's a little confusing, but by messing around with it, I kind of figured out what it does, or at least I think I understand what it does. If you just play this, use it on this, it sounds like a normal delay. Put it on this, to me it sounds exactly the same. But if you have a delay and then you click this while the delay is, you've got the echo happening, and while it's happening you click this, it plays it backwards. So you could automate this and you could get a reverse delay. So that could be interesting. But at first I thought, oh, this is just going to give me a reverse delay. No, it doesn't. It sounds the same, but when you click these back and forth in real time, you do get interesting reverse stuff happening. So that's what that's about, as far as I could tell. Here you can reverse the envelope, so instead of when the signal is louder, it moving the envelope the envelope one way, it's going to move it the other way. So instead of increasing the delay time as the signal is louder across the threshold, it'll decrease it. This syncs the rate of the LFO to the host, and this changes the phase of that. So once you've got that synced, you can move the phase of the LFO sweep across, back and forth, across the beat, as it were. So useful for syncing up modulation. It's got a sidechain input here actually as well, which could be useful. I'm going to click this here. What this does is it means that these controls which are in yellow are not going to get changed when you change patches. So you can set your input level and your output level in your mix, which I'm always going to have over here because I'm always going to use this as a send, and various other things here which will remain the same even when you change patches. So that's a nice feature. To be honest, I would like to see maybe in a revision that each of these had their own separate lock button. That would be really useful because I don't always want these things all together to be locked. But nonetheless, it's a useful feature to have. So that's it. Let's try some examples. I'm going to start with just a basic delay, and I'll just go through some of the controls, and then we'll listen to a few examples of some interesting patches. I've got a guitar playing a melody, and it's soloed so you can just hear it with the delay on its own. Let's have a listen to this guitar with a basic quarter note echo on it, delay on it, without any feedback, and I'll start to mess around with the sounds. And I'm going to start and stop it so you can hear the thing decay and hear what it does as it decays. Turn up the feedback so you can hear some repeats there. So you can hear this, it definitely sounds different than, say, a modern digital software delay. It's definitely got the sound of the converters of the time and all of that, which is interesting. And what these particular Lexicon units were known and revered for was that kind of sound that they have. So I'm going to put in the high cut so you can hear that. Being able to move this down here is not in the original, but a nice addition. So you can hear that pulls down the high end a lot quicker. Useful. Now these inverse phase things are not going to sound audible with a delay like this, but we'll hear them with a shorter delay, and there they really do make a difference. So I'm going to put this in and hear what that sounds like. So quite a different sound again. With that in there, more of a lo-fi sound. And now let's put a bit of modulation on here, and let's see what that's like. So you can hear it moving the pitch. So you can hear how the input signal has actually affected the pitch. I'm going to turn this up even a bit more. And again, this sound is quite an sort of iconic Lexicon delay sound at the time, that they really have got this absolutely down here, which is really great to be able to have access to this. Because although I've got my PCM41, it's really great to have this in software form, something where they've got it this accurate sounding. It really does sound like the real thing, and just to be able to have this to use anywhere across the mix, it's fantastic. So let's have a little bit more. Let's move this over here so we've got a bit of sine wave on it as well as some envelope. So you hear that it's got quite an unusual, you know, it's not just straightforward sounding on that modulation. It's really got something, non-linear is not technically the right word for it, but I think you know what I mean. It's got something that's kind of very unique to these units, and they really have got this down totally. So I think that's probably enough on the basics of this now. Let's move over to some examples of different delays. So let's have a listen to this one. So this has got like a real big pitch shift, but a really nice effect. Okay, so I think I'm going to play this in context so you can hear what it sounds like. I'll bring it in and bring it out. Nice effect, really nice effect. Okay, so that's one. Let's try another one here. I think I'm going to solo this up again here. Nice and very nice kind of lo-fi effect. Bit more on this one. So the way that decays, they've got that so nice, and they've done that so well. It's, you know, there's a lot going on there. It's not just a high pass getting a bit more, like the signal is degrading as it goes in a very particular kind of way, which is nice. Okay, let's move on here. Okay, let's try this one. And this has just got a nice, bit like the one I showed earlier, it's just got a nice bit of modulation on the delay, which is nice. Now let's try a couple of others here. Let's try this, an interesting. This is interesting because it's a very short delay time with modulation going on based on the input signal. but it's such a short time that if you turn this up, it starts to feed back on itself. Now that in itself is interesting. This one is a patch that I made which has a very short delay time, but it's kind of self-oscillating in a strange kind of way, and it's being driven by the input, the modulation. So if you have, it's kind of almost like a ring modulator effect. If you play around with these controls, you get some really interesting stuff. Have a listen. You can actually get some really interesting stuff here. I found some settings where you get just in a point and it actually sits there for a while, and very occasionally it whistles and does something weird and goes into some secondary oscillation in a kind of chaotic behavior. So yeah, this is not a normal delay. This is really something special. So let's move on from this now, and let's look at some examples of what you could do with this. So here's one with, say, putting two delays up, both with a quarter note, but having a slightly different delay time. So moving this up a little bit so that this one's slightly longer, meaning that you'll hear a separation and you'll get a stereo effect. So let's have a listen to that. So you get a kind of real kind of moving, swirling, swaying kind of thing. And because there's also some modulation going on here, not exactly the same modulation, then again you get a difference, and you get very lush and non-repeating kind of almost organic kind of effect. So let's try this again with the music and see what that's like. Really great sounding delay. Okay, so one more here, and this is something where we're going to have a really short delay time, and again I've got two of them, so it's like a really rich chorusing effect, and I'm going to mess around with delay times on this once I've played this for a bit, just so that you can hear what it's like with some very short delay times and changing some of the other settings. Now again, you can really hear it's driving hard into the red here. You can really hear that crunchy preamp going on, overdriven preamp, which is really nice sound. I'm going to put a bit of reverb in there because there's no delays going on that create any kind of ambience, so I'm going to stick that in there. Okay, I had the feedback up a little too high there and it was self-oscillating, but you get the idea. This thing is really an amazing sounding unit. It's got a fantastic sounding chorus and flanges you've just heard, or whatever you want to call that. It's very short delay time. It is a flanger, in effect, that can self-oscillate or not. And, you know, you can stack these things up. So you could have a nice delay and then put that flanging or chorus on the delay, and there's no end to what you could do with this, obviously, like any delay. But what I like about it is it's just got that really nice Lexicon sound that just sits in the mix. It just sounds lush and just seems to become part of the sound that is on and sitting beautifully in a mix in a kind of very lush kind of organic way. So big thumbs up to this one. I think they've done a fantastic job on it. And the sound design, I didn't even get into these kinds of things, but the sound design potential on this is pretty amazing. You don't realize what is capable of until you really start messing around. And there's some great presets in here that can show some of that off, some of the really unusual, interesting things you can do with it. So yeah, I hope you found this useful. And if you did, please do give the video a like and ring the bell and subscribe. And if you can press the thanks button, it really helps keep the channel going, and it's greatly appreciated. And hope to see you next time.